Hi, this is Siofra's Magic Alcove, and I'm Siofra Bradigan. So, another subject that's come up of late is the problem with expectations and how they trip us up and make life more challenging and difficult, to say the least. So, expectations are something that we do a lot. I know I do. It can start off as something normal, like getting ready to go see a movie. And I've had this one in particular happen to me based on the ads or whatever they see for a movie. I get a certain idea of what the movie's going to be like. And then I build up an expectation about what that experience is going to be. And then if it doesn't match the imaginary experience, because I haven't had it yet, that I build up inside my head when I go, I'm always disappointed. And that's one of the biggest problems with expectations. It sort of sets you up for disappointment because it's very, very rare that anything will succeed in actually fulfilling an expectation that we have. And being aware of the fact that we're doing it is the first step, I guess, towards being more in the moment in your life and not living through the ideal of what it is you think should happen or the anxiety of what you think might happen. It doesn't matter whether it's a positive or negative. Expectations can be either. And in either sense, it does us a disservice. So when it comes to our spiritual quests, development, and so forth, it becomes a roadblock for our personal development. And you think of it this way. Let's take psychic abilities as an example. So you watch a lot of movies, you read a lot of books, people describe what their experiences are like. Then you start to build up an image in your mind about what should happen if you get that particular ability. So if it's clairvoyance, according to the movies, you see things very clearly. It's like, it's like seeing a movie. It's funny, isn't it? You see these images clearly when you have a vision. It's like there's no hesitation or no confusion or any of that other stuff. Or with telepathy, you hear a voice in your head and it's very distinct and very direct, and you know exactly what the other person is thinking. You can go on down the line and you can identify what are the things you think are supposed to happen if you get that ability. And then look at those expectations and try to see if you can like unhook them from your consciousness. Not sure exactly how to describe that, but if you free yourself up from the expectation of the experience you think you're supposed to have, then you're more present in the moment and are more likely to be able to sense, identify, notice nuanced changes in yourself and your perception. It's very similar in a lot of ways of trying to describe what color is to someone who's colorblind or who doesn't have good vision. You can approximate it, you can tell people what you think is happening to you and so forth, but the actual experience itself is going to be very unique and individual to you and who you are. The other thing that expectations can do is it can literally block the actual experience. Because if your mind has built up a really good image of what's supposed to happen, then you're setting your mental faculties up to look for and identify the particular signifiers that you're expecting to see, sense, feel, hear, whatever it might be. And so you're laser focused on these things, like these are the building blocks that I'm looking for, and these are the shapes of these blocks and the color of these blocks and the sound of these blocks, whatever they are. And so you've got your mind looking for these things. And if what's happening to you is like something else completely different over here, you're never going to notice it. You're not going to be able to experience it because you're going to dismiss it because it doesn't fit what it is you're looking for. And this is true of ideas, notions, narratives, all that stuff all comes in under this heading and problem with expectations. If you have completely identified with a particular narrative, regardless of what it is, whether you think you're here to do something special, or whether you've joined a religious group, or you're following a specific line of thinking, or a book, or a process, or an idea, or a person, you define the parameters of whatever it is as being, this is the reality that I want, or the reality that I expect, or the reality I will accept. And then everything else is like off off the table, off the map, you know, invisible to the eye, unable to accept or perceive or experience. And it is like to be able to be present without expectations includes without judgment, because usually expectations and judgments kind of go hand in hand. Like when I'm experiencing my interactions with spirit, whether it's fairies or angels or, you know, non-human entities or human spirit ghosts or whatever it happens to be, if I go in without expectations, then I'm more likely to actually read a situation correctly as to what's happening. And I discovered that in my paranormal investigations. That one was a pretty interesting learning experience on a lot of levels. And one of them was, you know, the absorbed information I got from talking to people or watching shows or doing research, whatever. And the assumptions that other people had come to as far as expectations of what to encounter, I was pretty surprised and quite tickled in reality when I would go on a paranormal investigation and go with an open mind and discover that what I found was something I had not ever imagined would be there. And so it gave me a lot more confidence in my ability to perceive what was going on based on the fact that if it was just my own personal projection, which we've talked about, projection, which is another thing we have to work on, not having, then things would go the way I imagined they would, and it would meet my expectations. So, not too long after I started encountering this kind of stuff, I was able to let go of expectations when I'm going out on that kind of a experiential detective journey to find out what's happening. And therefore, by doing that, had more direct experiences with unexpected results. Because certainly one of my commitments to the path and to myself and to reality and so forth is to try and set aside human interpretation of what reality is supposed to be and how spirit is supposed to act and all that stuff, and instead try to meet reality as itself on its own terms without all the human definitions and expectations of how things are supposed to be. I had that sort of epiphany when I lived up in Regina, um, just before I started channeling, actually. And I was thinking one day about, you know, all the different books that I'd read and all the things that I'd heard and so forth. And it just suddenly became clear that everything I thought I knew about everything was based on human interpretation and digestion and sharing of that interpretation with others. And, it's become also pretty clear that people we're not as bright and as intelligent and with it as we think we are. We're a lot muddier when it comes to actual reality. We bring a lot of confusion to the table, like not sure where we belong, what we're supposed to do, why we're here, all these questions, and then trying to force reality to give us answers that make us happy, which there may not be. I mean, it could be that that's not actually part of how reality functions, whether we like it or not. But the whole um, idea of letting go of those expectations and try to come at it with like a pure heart, a clean slate, an unencumbered mind, um, an open mind, and trying not to interpret everything that comes in is one of the methods or approaches I've adopted to try and help me deal with that. Doesn't mean it doesn't happen. I mean, there's still moments and so forth in my life where I have an expectation that I'm going to go do something in particular, for example, and then circumstances shift and now I can't do whatever it was I thought I was going to do and I have to do something else or I have to adapt to the changes in my environment. It makes me a lot more adaptable. Letting go of that kind of stuff. It used to be really annoying when I was with David and we would like make these plans and it's like we'd have our plan in place and then we would get ready to go do the plan and then he would change the plan, which was very annoying to me because I had a plan. It was in my head and this was what we were going to do. So, yeah, interesting training ground. Still annoying, but it was interesting anyway. And over the years, I've become a lot more adaptable. A lot of times people ask me what my plans are for the day, and it's like, I don't have any. I'm going to see what happens, see how I feel, see where life takes me, where interest pulls me, where energy allows me, whatever it happens to be, adapting to the people that I live with or that I know, to circumstances and so forth. And I think the ability to adapt is a part of our evolutionary process that sort of is the thing that decides whether a species is going to survive or not when it's on the brink of extinction, is its ability to adapt to change and new environmental factors or hazards or whatever. So I think that letting go of expectations really helps us with that. And the other thing too is that when we have a really solid expectation going, like how should I meditate or what should happen when I meditate, and we fail to succeed, we don't meet our expectation, then we judge ourselves harshly and put ourselves down or what have you. And it's a useless exercise in futility when we do that because it doesn't help us become better at whatever it is. The thing is all of us are going to have a different approach that works for us. And if we think the only success can be measured by someone else's criteria, what determines um, correct approach or success, and it's not something our particular personality or brain chemistry or whatever it is we're dealing with can accomplish, then every time we try to do it the way that doesn't work for us, we reinforce the fact that we're failing at that and we're not worthy of evolution or spiritual development or whatever it might be. And I understand the need for us to ask questions about it to try and get ideas because ideas can help us to formulate, I don't know, a tactic to try. But when we get attached to someone else's truth, for example, then we miss our own truth. And then we're not going to succeed in our own development because we're trying to mimic someone else's. It's annoying in that sense. But when I was talking about this a while ago, I was thinking about, you know, how different brains are and how brains work differently depending on who you are. There's so many different factors. Our brain chemistry is so unique to each one of us. And when I was involved in a series of experiments at the University of Saskatchewan, they had this device called a mind mirror that they stuck on your head, and it detected your brainwave frequencies in the moment. So it was like a real-time indicator. There was a display. Each brainwave frequency had its own line, and you could see which side of the brain was active, how strong the signal was in every single frequency that they had there. And I found that interesting because it gave me some direct feedback into what I was feeling, sensing internally, and then seeing happening on the mind mirror display. And two of the things that were of note to me during that series of experiments, one was when I closed my eyes, I'm immediately in a low alpha state. That's all it took. It didn't matter what else was going on in my brain. If I was thinking about other stuff at the same time, if I closed my eyes, my lower alpha just sort of started going on both sides. So I considered that was a pretty cool thing. And along those lines, when they had me try to do healing work on somebody, while I was hooked up and they were hooked up, I don't remember what their brainwave pattern did because I was more interested in my own, right? Um, that was very interesting as well because as soon as I started closing my eyes, focusing and sending healing energy, my alpha waves just sort of went off the end of the scale that they had. And they have one of those progressive scales on the machine. So the first level is like the lowest level, so they can see even very um, like small changes in brainwave patterns. And since my alpha waves went off the end, they switched to the next scale, which measures more like higher frequencies or energy output. And at that output, my alpha waves were still off the end of the scale. So then they switched it to the third level. And at that point, they still couldn't find the end of my alpha waves. I never did find out how strong my alpha waves actually were. But at that third level, when you're looking at the machine, the display, the only thing that was there was my alpha waves, and none of the other thoughts I had any impact whatsoever, which I thought was pretty interesting. So that was one thing. And then the other thing that was fascinating to me, being hooked up to that, was when I was channeling at the time. This was around the time I started channeling. And when my higher spirit guardian, higher self, Moida, would approach my body, she always approached me from the left, and I would always feel it as like this tingling sensation in the lower part of my head, right in the base of my brain. And while I was hooked up to the monitor, she came into the room and I felt her very strongly. I could feel the tingling and I knew that she was there. The experimenter who was watching my brainwave patterns noted something had shifted in my patterns and asked me what was going on because my lowest theta waves were going off the chart on the left side. And it was very confusing for the experimenter. So he asked me what was happening, and I told him I was sensing the presence of my spirit guide, and that she was there, and I could feel her really strongly. And he told me that the waveforms I was producing were not possible if I was awake. And yet I was awake because I was talking and my eyes were open. So the assumption was that I was indeed awake, and yet I was producing these lower frequencies. And then he asked whether she would be willing to come in, and she thought that would be great, and I said okay. And for me, my personal physical experience with her coming in is like I move aside, I move over to the right side of my head to give her room to come in to the left, and then she interfaces with me like this way. And when she did that, my beta waves went nuts. They just went crazy. And he asked her, are you doing a lot of thinking? Because these are the shortest brain waves that we make, and we associate them with certain kinds of logic thinking, mathematical equations, and that kind of thing. And she said, I call it being present. My interpretation of that was that since their space is a vibrational frequency above us, and if that's true, I don't know, that's sort of the sense of it, like a finer vibrational frequency, that her trying to come down to my frequency, the beta waves would be the ones that she would be able to interact with first. It'd be those waves. And the lower ones were the way of like making an introduction and letting me know that she was there. So, I got some good experiential data about how my brain works. Now, whether other people's brain works like that, I don't know. And I don't know if anyone else has been hooked up to a mind mirror when they were doing that kind of stuff. She found the machine fascinating because it could detect her presence. That was one of the reasons why, when he noticed and my brainwave had gone out on the left, the lower left, she was quite intrigued. And so they had a bit of a conversation, and then she left and I was back. I don't know that I ever would have thought of any of that if I was trying to like visualize an expectation of what that experience would be like. So, not having any experience in that field and not having any expectations, things just happened. I think that that is part of it. But if you think about this, other world examples, like normal world examples. So, a friend of yours says, hey, I got this somebody I want you to meet, and I think you're going to like them a lot. So, they have just set an expectation that the person that they like and you are going to hit it off and get along great. This usually doesn't work out well for me. I'm a bit of a rabble rouser, and I don't like being stuck in a box, but then I'm like, I'm going to make up my own mind, that kind of thing. But the thing that happens if you get together with the person and you don't hit it off, then your friend is disappointed because their expectations have not been fulfilled. They were wrong. If they could just introduce people and not tell you what they think is going to happen, it'd probably be better. I have this weird thing in my head. I'm sure it's like a self sabotage type of thing. Whenever somebody gives me directions and they say you can't miss it, I'm guaranteed to miss it. I just, every single time, I tell people, please don't tell me I can't miss it, because you would be surprised at how easy it is for me not to see the giant sign that's blinking all over the place that you told me about and miss it completely. Because apparently I have an expectation that I'm going to miss it. I don't know why. But we work with what we have. And every time you meet somebody, even someone you know, and you have an expectation of how things are going to go, you have set up a series of energetic blocks to allowing things to evolve naturally and to happen the way they're supposed to. And I think on an unconscious level, the other people sense that. And some of them are probably like me and, don't like being put in a box of expectations. And so then things don't go well. It's it's sort of an interesting subject on so many different levels because most of the time we don't think about it. It just happens. You go to a restaurant you like and you expect that the food is going to be the same quality as it was the last time you were there, which seems to be a reasonable expectation. But unbeknownst to you, they've changed hands, they have a new cook, they've changed the menu completely, and you get there and nothing is the same. Are you going to like the new food? Maybe. Probably not, because you were planning on having something that you used to have and it's not there anymore, and you're going to be disappointed. It's just funny, how those things can color our experience of reality. And it's not necessarily true that the food is worse or the menu is bad or any of that other stuff. It's just different than you expected, but there it was. There was that expectation. We certainly need to have information and to make choices because the fact that it used to be a good restaurant is one of the reasons why we decided to go there in the first place. Because, we expect we're not going to die from food poisoning. But yeah, it's movies just drive me crazy. Anytime I've seen a movie where I've had an expectation built up that it has never has met my expectation either for good or for bad, and it's always been a disappointment because the two images, energies of the two things just don't match. They clash with each other, and they're like at loggerheads. It's like I thought it was going to be this, but then it was this, and a lot of times later with movies in particular, after a few years, now that I know what the movie's going to be like, I can watch it again and actually enjoy it the second time because I no longer have an expectation of what it's going to be that I've built up in my head. It makes me less trusting of advertising for sure when it comes to movies. There was one in particular I took you into that they advertised like it was a romantic uh, comedy drama kind of thing, but not a romantic drama tragedy. And towards the end of the movie, they killed off one of the main characters, in my opinion, for no good reason, only to make us feel bad. I was very annoyed by that. But the real problem for me was that I took my husband to see it because he was depressed. And that was a big fail. He was not feeling any better when we were done. He was feeling a lot worse. So, eh, yeah. So I'm a lot more, you know, suspicious when it comes to what advertisers will tell me what's going on, which is probably a good caution. But this is true of magic and making a spell, and you've decided how you think a spell is going to work. You put out like something into the universe, you're looking for help or an idea or something like that. And again, if you're too structured in your thinking about what it's going to be, you miss it. The universe could put it in front of you 100 times and you could ignore it all 100 times because you were looking for one shape and it came in another. So, really important when we're doing our magical work to keep a uncluttered mind. And even though they talk about clarity of intention and focus on what you want and so forth, to a certain extent, yes, you're setting the energetic pull or push out there in order to get something done. But it works better when you trust the universe to bring it to you how it works best for you. and just try and pay attention as much as you can. So, anyway, yeah. So that's probably enough for this particular subject. I'd love to hear some of your experiences with unfulfilled expectations and what you've learned from them and what your ideas of dealing with that kind of issues might be. Like I said, my attempt is to keep as open and unjudgmental a mind as possible when I go into a new situation so that I'm getting as much feedback as I can from the universe as I go and paying attention to the signals that the universe sends me. Anyway, this is Siofra's Magic Alcove, and I'm Siofra Bradigan. Blessed be.